Let's get it cracking. We're going to talk about JavaScript apps and internationalization APIs, and it's going to be great. Cool. It's a good start. There we go. The clicker works as well. My name's Nash. I'm absolutely delighted you decided to come and see this talk right at the end of the day. I am a developer evangelist at Twilio. And Twilio, if you don't know, is a platform for communications. That means it's a whole bunch of APIs that you can use in your apps to do everything from sending and receiving text messages and emails to creating video chats, making phones ring, all sorts of stuff. If you can think of it in communications, you can probably do so with Twilio and use that inside your apps. I'm not here to talk about Twilio right now, but for the rest of the conference, I am out at the Twilio stand over there and absolutely there to talk about Twilio. So please come and ask me questions. And my swag just turned up, so I also now have socks and scrunchies and some fun stickers and hats and stuff. So come say hi out there, it'd be great. And but if you also have any questions about this or anything about Twilio, do find me online. I'm at Phil Nash on Twitter and everything else. Or drop me an email. I'm philnash@twilio.com. You can't forget that. Cool. So the reason I started thinking about this talk and the kind of impact that we can have on our users with like internationalization APIs was actually kind of events, but events over the last couple of years. All those online events that that kind of people help to organize in lieu of these in-person, face-to-face meetings. As a developer evangelist, I do find myself talking at these events, and I enjoy that. And so the last 2 years, I've done a lot of talking to a camera from my own room, and that's fine. I've enjoyed that too. But my problem was kind of around the fact that these events existed in all different places around the world. Now, this is brilliant because you can go to conferences and learn things from people all over the place without having to leave your home, without having to get on a plane, without having to do all of that. And the events were a lot cheaper because not renting a convention center is a lot easier to do when you're just going online. But they cause some issues as well, because if there's a conference or a thing in Europe or in the US, and somebody asks, what time are you speaking, or what time is that thing on, this question becomes a lot more ambiguous than, say, if somebody were to ask me earlier today, and I said 20 to 6, no problem, just before the beers. Sorry about that. But if you say that online, you say 20 to 6, what does that mean? 20 to 6 where, when, and in what day or time? We actually lose an awful lot of context when we put things online, especially around time, and that kind of bothered me. And I was like, there must be something, there must be some way that JavaScript can help us out here. And I found it, so we'll get to that in a bit. But there's more to just context like that. We have context is not just that where and when, but also like who's saying this, right? Who's correct here? Are these the same dates? I guess so if we put the flags up with it, but we don't know that. What we do know is that this side of the slide is incorrect. I proved that. I found a map online of countries that use different date codes like that, and it looks like this. As you can see, the people in green use the day, month, year version. People in blue use some kind of mix of them at times, I think. And the people in red are wrong and use month, day, year, just straight up incorrect. Obviously, as developers, we absolutely know that the correct one is year, month, day, because we can sort and search on that all as easy as we can. But I know green here is good, red is bad, and we'll work out what the rest are up to sometime later. But it's not just that, because even though we're doing the reverse dates here, like when it comes down to it, here in Australia, the day is not the same day as it is in the US either. Twilio runs a conference called Signal every year, and we were like, we actually put on the conference website last year, we're like, it's on the 2nd and 3rd of October, but in APAC, where you get to it first, it's on the 3rd and 4th. And that makes sense, because yeah, the days are not necessarily lined up to the right date as well. So displaying a time online requires an awful lot more context than we necessarily give ourselves. And so, what can we do about that? Oh, sorry, those contexts include times, dates, places, even the language, right? I'm lucky enough that most places and most of these conferences tend to publish themselves in English, but we could be sharing this in a different language as well, and making that just more accessible for people around the world would be better. So how can the platform help? This is what I always ask myself. I try to ask what the platform can do before I ask whether there's a library that we can do this with. And if you take away anything from this talk, I'd hope it's that. And it's an incredible thing that the JavaScript platform, or sorry, the web platform, actually gives us a lot of this. And in this particular case, it's actually the JavaScript platform rather than web in general, because all of this is actually going to work in Node as well. You see, there's a task group, ECMA 402. They are responsible for the internationalization APIs in JavaScript. Because that is it's under the ECMAScript kind of group. And so this is for JavaScript as a whole. Like I said, it's not just the web. All of these things will work in Node.js and any other platform that kind of implements ECMAScript as a standard. The ECMA 402 task group work on what are the Intl APIs. And so Intl is the namespace under which JavaScript helps us to internationalize a website, a web application. And I want to spend the time in this talk telling you about each of the ones that I think are cool and useful and we should probably be using in our application. So the Intl APIs give us a couple of things. Each of them kind of work slightly differently to each other because some of them are formatters and produce a result, and some of them kind of just allow you to provide rules. And you have to come up with the result yourself. And this will become more clear as we see the different ones in action. So dates and times were my original bugbear, and that's what I want to start with talking about now and showing you how they work. So under Intl, under that namespace, we have the Intl datetime format. This formatter allows us to hand over a date to it, and then it will format it in any sort of number of ways that are going to be useful to the end user. Let's go back to that. I'm just going to show a couple of things. First up, like one of those problems was time zone. What time zone are you in right now? The Intl, these Intl APIs actually know where you are. Like you can call on a new Intl datetime format object, call on resolved options, and it's got an object of things, and it tells you the time zone. Your browser knows where you are, which is great. And so that means if we provide a date to this formatter in ISO 8601 format, so that's the sort of standard, a good all-round standard, but also the sort of JavaScript version of it, which is, let's make a new date. Date equals new date, and it's today. We'll do today, which is the 6th, 22nd, 23rd? 23rd. Time is getting away from me. And then on to set time. So at 7:40 in the morning in Z, Z being UTC, this is how JavaScript likes ISO 8601 format. It doesn't care about the time zone. It's just like, give me UTC, that's all I want. And that's what the Z means. If we create that, then already the kind of printing version of this from DevTools here has shown me that it's actually 20 to 6. It's the time my talk started here in Australian Eastern Standard Time. Thanks, date object. So it knows, it's aware of this. And so if when you are saving or storing dates in an application, as long as if you store them in UTC and then use JavaScript to display them, you can, at least on the front end, always get it in the time zone of the user that is looking at it. That's all I wanted. That's all I wanted from these events. I wanted to know what time when I looked at it. Maybe I'm selfish. But right, you can then take that and use the actual formatters. So we've got a date time formatter. And so when we create one of these, we give it, we can create one by default, which will use the browser's natural language, or you can give it a language, so we can just give it English, and then we can format that date. When we do so, we get kind of a default format, which is wrong, as we can see, because EN in this is just regular English, which of course is American English because they invented it. I guess they think that. Anyway, so we get EN, but if we were indeed to do this in the right English, we can pick Australian English, for example, and we'll get it the right way around. And so the default format comes with day, month, year in some sort of order. But we can add a lot more to that. I'm just going to copy a big big set of options here and have time to type all of that out, and you don't want to watch me type it all out. But if we wanted to look at in British format, ENGB, which actually is just the same as the Australian one when we come down to it, but put this time in Paris and choose different ways of printing it out, then we'll get a lovely, nice, long date, Thursday, 23rd of June, 2022, AD, at 9:40 in the morning, Central European Standard Time. Brilliant. Currently 2 hours off of UTC, even though they're in Paris. And so those various kind of options here, like we've got day, month, year, weekday, error. Error is our AD. We actually have, I like the long error, actually. If you change that up, we actually get 23rd of June, 2022, Anno Domini. Didn't think you were going to get any Latin in this, did you? But we get all these options. And so even, yeah, we share the time zone. We can change time zone up to long as well. I quite like that one. It really puts it out Central European summertime, not Central, yeah. And we can, there's options where we have numeric. There can be like 2-digit as well, which tends to be useful for those times where you need there always to be 2 digits, so it will pad the first one with a 0. But that's not going to show up on any of this date right now. So that's our Intl datetime formatter. It allows us to completely control a date and what it looks like on the page and how it appears to that user. And sort of like I said, in the front end, the browser can know our time zone. But when you're dealing with the back end, if you're doing this in Node.js, that is where you want to pass a time zone to it. So you might need to know your user's time zone if you are printing this out from the server side. Cool. But datetime formats is not the only thing we can do with dates and times on the web. Sorry, in JavaScript. I always think this web stuff. It's JavaScript in this case. We actually get relative time as well. These are those kind of like, you posted a comment 3 minutes ago, and that kind of thing, which we've actually had, and there's been JavaScript libraries to do that for a long time, but JavaScript can do it. And in this case, it works slightly differently to our datetime format object. So as I said, we have those formatters, which is very much the datetime format. It produces that final string that you can put on a page. The relative timer thing is more of a building block, where you set a time period and then the offset from it. So you kind of take a time and then you take the offset from it in a number of units. And we're going to see it's much easier to see that if we just write it out. So if we actually grab a Intl relative time format, and we'll do it in English. We'll do it in NAU, why not? And format, it says format. We're going to give it 3 and then hours. And so yeah, it gives us that in 3 hours. We've got this, we can use that. This is a formatter as well, but you kind of give it the rules. And if you say it was in fact -3 hours, we get 3 hours ago, right? And this is actually, I think this is quite cool. This just exists in the platform. And there's a bunch of other things we can do with it. So we can actually sort of pass some more options to it. So for example, we can actually say numeric auto, which gives it the option to not use a numeric thing. So that works. In 3 hours ago, there's not much else you can say for 3 hours ago. But if you change the offset unit today and change it to, say, 1 ago, that's yesterday. And 1 in the future is tomorrow. If we took off our numeric auto there, that's in 1 day and 1 day ago. So it really gives you a lot of those options. And of course, because this is doing it, because these are built into the system as well, we can do that in French, for example, or whatever language you want to display. I think it's quite useful. I meant to go back to the numeric auto thing. There we go. In one tag, or indeed Morgan, in German. It gives us that, and it has a whole bunch of options. We've got seconds, minutes, hours, days, and even for your business people, quarters. Nash quarter? I didn't know that. Just make sure I'm not making no sense at all. Next quarter, there we go. In 1 quarter, or in, in, say, 4 quarters time, which is, of course, a year. And year works as well. I think this relative time formatter is brilliant because for all of those plugins and things that we've ever used to make a comment appear to come from a number of days, seconds, or weeks ago, we can just use this, and it will not only appear, it'll only sort of work it out itself without having to include a whole library. I love using less other people's JavaScript. It will also it will also do it in the language that your user is looking at it in. Now, it's of course entirely possible that if you are building an entirely English site, you haven't localized it at all, you don't really want to have just the relative time things come out in French when a French person looks at it. So you can, that's why you can still set that language there in the formatter to start with. Cool, so relative time format, use that. It's great for those kind of things. They're really, really there for you. Now, plurals. Plurals is a slightly different one. It's slightly different because plurals is now dealing with actual translations of content. And so this API is less of a formatter and more of a set of rules. And those rules you can then plug your own translations into. So plurals deals with, it's rules, not a formatter. You then kind of create your own formatting functions out of it. But you do need your own translations. And so if you are actually localizing a site, plural rules are going to help you with this kind of thing. And plural rules give you cardinals and ordinals, that is, counting things and kind of places of things. So 1 cat, 2 cats, 3 cats, and or the first cat, second cat, and third cat. I mentioned cats because that is my demo for this. Because it turns out there are different rules in different languages for how you actually do counting and things like that. Now, English is fairly straightforward. I've just got a function over here to pluralize the word cats. So this creates a plural rules in English and gives us back a function ultimately that. So what is happening is this pr.select right here. We create the plural rules and they're for English, and that's the stuff that's built into the platform. And then we say pr.select count, which is the number that we pass into this, and it is going to give us a rule. The rule is either, in this case, one or other. That's going to be the result. That's how English works. We have, when we pluralize something, we have one of a thing or other of a thing. So we have 0 cats, 1 cat, 2 cats, more cats. And that's fine, right? If we do plural English cats, we'll get what we expect. No cats, 1 cat, 2 cats. 500 cats. A concerning lifestyle. But when I was looking into this, I found out that Welsh, for example, has 6 of these. I don't know how to speak Welsh, but so I'm not going to try and say any of these out loud. But let me get my Welsh plural cats function. And in this case, there are rules for 0, 1, 2, few, many, and other. And now some of them are the same, right? 1 and 2 is actually the same in terms of the word cat, but it doesn't have to be for others. And they, again, few and other are the same, and many is different. And many does not go for long between few and other. It's weird. But right, so we get our plural Welsh cats. So if we pass in 0, we get 0 cathod. Don't know how that's pronounced. I presume I'm wrong. 1 is ga. 2 is also 3 is then into few. So 3 is few. So where we learn something about it. 4 is few. 5 is few. But 6 is many. 6 and 7 is more than that. So 6 is many. If you go to Wales and somebody tells you there are many things out there, you know that there are 6 of them. And we learned that from our Intl rules. And so yeah, so these plural rules give us that object which we can select a rule from, and we can then translate into the thing. You will want obviously a more, if you are, I always think these kind of things are more useful. They're not useful for user-generated content, but they're useful for that stuff around a website that you do control. If it's not cats, but maybe comments, you have 4 new comments. This is the sort of thing that can translate that successfully for you, rather than trying to be like an entire translator. So yeah, I hope we've learned things about plurals, but also cats, or indeed Welsh. We've got ordinals as well. I can just show you that quickly. It's not quite as fun. Of course, English, British? What am I trying to do here? English has 4 types of ordinals, right? First, second, third, and something, 0th or 4th. And so the thing works exactly the same. You just have to set a different type in your plurals there. So by default, it is a cardinal. Set a different type to ordinal, and you have got yourself format English ordinals first. Oops, I thought I had. Sure. Format English ordinals. Yes, it's a function. First, second, third is just giving us the rules, and 4th. And it will do 0th as well, which is cool. It's official. I always thought 0th was sort of made up, but it's official. JavaScript agrees with it. So those are the plural rules. Like I said, we get rules that we then make our own formatter out of, depending on what we're trying to translate. But we have to bring our own translations to that. Next up are numbers. Now, I would never necessarily have thought numbers might be a difficult thing here. But it turns out people around the world have very different ideas of what numbers should look like. And I really didn't know. So for that, we have our Intl number format object here. Intl number format takes, as usual, our sort of language and allows us to format it in what you'd expect that language to look like. So English is fairly straightforward. We're going to format. Oh, it's because I didn't put new on it. There you go. We're going to format, say, the number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.89. It's a good example. And you expect that, right? You get commas every third number. A decimal place is a full stop, is a period, and then the 89. Cool, right? That's exactly what you'd expect. But the French wouldn't. They would expect to drop the commas and actually use commas instead of periods. Fine. Similarly, the Germans would just, oops, really broke that. The Germans would reverse them from what we have, so dots and commas. And then you get even more kind of fun ones, like we'll go back to English languages, but English in India, oh, for goodness sake, English in India puts the commas in different places, right? That's, I believe, 12 lakh or 34 lakh, I think, I don't know. It's hard to kind of exactly understand, but it all makes sense to them. I think I'm trying to work out if, yeah, they just keep going. After the first 3, you then break it up into 2s. And that's how they expect to see it. So when we're displaying a number like this to somebody, we should be displaying it the way they expect to see it. And then it's good to find something else as well. And so Arabic, Egyptian, just those are Arabic Egyptian numbers. That's great. But it's like not just numbers. Again, this is something you could be using inside some of those plural things. Again, you're displaying one comment is new since you last went to this website. You've used the plural rule, but if you expect to get to 1,000 comments, maybe that's not a good idea. Don't read the comments, I think is the best idea, but that's going to build up and you end up being able to format these correctly. But it's also really important if you're in e-commerce or something like that, where you're trying to sell something, when you've got a price, and you want people to recognize and understand the price in their language as well. And so the number formatter helps us with that as well. Let's imagine it's a very expensive thing. We'd go back to English, but we'll start throwing some rules in now. Like the style should be currency, a useful thing to do. And then when the style is currency, you can set the currency object to, let's start with AUD, why not? So here we are. And so this has given us 1,234,567 Australian dollars and 89 cents. And you will note, of course, that we have an $A at the front there. That is again because default English, sadly, is American English. And so if we were to do that in Australian, it's just $1. Brilliant. Well, that's kind of useful as well, right? If you are displaying a price in Australian dollars to somebody in the US, you kind of want them to understand that this is an Australian dollar and not a US dollar, or you have to do the conversion for them. And similarly, if you do that, we're in English Australian language, and we do a US dollar, it's going to show us in USD. It's nice. There's some other bits. So it's useful to see, what the French think of this. In Australian dollars, let's say. Again, that is just, well, that's now changed the side in which the thing is, because in French, it's 1 million. Actually, why don't we have the dollars at the end? That's how we say it. That's what it looks like. And I don't think the Germans do it particularly differently, but again, we just see the different number formats. And then, they do, right, so the French have dollars Australian, and the Germans have Australian dollars, as you can see. So it all makes sense, or at least it makes sense when you're reading it in your own language in your own time, and you should be able to see that. You can, of course, add some more options to this. If we go back to French, but in this particular place, say currency, we can set the currency display to narrow symbol. And that just gives us dollars again. That gives us just the sort of currency symbol, which is useful if that's what you want to say. But it's not just currency that we can do through this. There are a whole bunch of other units that you can add. So let's start again with a new Intl number format in English. The style this time won't be currency, but unit. And then you can pass not a currency, but a unit. And there's a whole bunch of units, there's weights and measures, that kind of thing. But I like that we have megabytes as an option here. The unit should be the megabyte, and let's format 256 of them. 256 megabyte, brilliant. But then you can actually, you can turn it to be longer. So previously we could say the currency display was narrow symbol. We can actually set the unit display we said the currency display was narrow symbol, and this time we can go unit display is long, so it says megabytes, and then you just get to have fun playing around with the languages and see what people call megabytes in other countries. Megaoctet, for example, or and actually just megabyte in Germany. They didn't bother. That's the thing about French, isn't it? The French government are find it very important to make sure that they make up a word for everything that they come up with. And then regular French people call things le internet and le computer and les megabytes. And the French government's like, I think you'll find it's megaoctet. Listen to us and we'll be correct. I haven't tried this one before, but I kind of want to go and see what it is in Arabic Egypt. There you go. Egyptian Arabic, that is, I'm not going to try and pronounce it. I don't know how to read it. But the point being here is that we can always use these things to display bits of our UI, bits of our applications to our users in the ways that they would expect and the ways that are going to make most sense to them. And it's so useful. So let's get out of number format. I talked about units. And then, like I said, I'm going to get through this relatively quickly in case they've got the beers already. Lists is kind of my final thing I want to talk about. The list one is great. It's also very confusing. But basically, if you've ever had that time when you've written a reducer on an array so that you print out all the things in the array with a comma beneath them, except for the last one, which has and between the two of them. You don't have to do that. That is in the system for us with Intl's list format. Which is cool. Let's make a list. I was watching. Oh, there you go. Hello. Did this earlier, didn't I? Let's come back to that. I was watching Amy's talk earlier, where she made a Quokka bot, a WhatsApp number and an email. You could send in pictures, and it would tell you if the picture contains a quokka or not. And so I was like, okay, when I do the list of things, I'm going to list fun Australian animals. These are my 3 favorites. But when we want to print them out, we don't want to have to map over this and insert commas and things like that. We want to take Intl for a spin and use the list format. And I will finish that off. So in this particular case, vehicles, animals. In this particular case, in Australian English, when we say we'd like a list of these things, the type is conjunction, so it's and, because we can do the other one, which is a disjunction, which is ors. And we get koala, wombat, or quokka. But what I think is interesting about the and, the conjunction, is that there's actually no way to handle the Oxford comma. Now, I don't know if you are a fan of the Oxford comma or not, but obviously, as you can see in Australian English, it is not in the conjunction. In British English, it is not the home of Oxford. However, in US, Oxford comma, apparently. And obviously, it doesn't make sense in this particular sentence, but it turns out that there's just not a control over it within this API. So it's a little bit sad. It kind of takes things out of your hands. There is a long GitHub comment thread about whether the writers of the API should or shouldn't care about this, and whether there should be an option in there alongside style and type, just Oxford, true or false, which was rejected. And instead, they raised bugs with CLDR, which is the sort of international effort to put these kind of translation things together, and with Unicode for some reason. Perhaps asking for a new symbol, the Oxford comma, to set aside from actual commas. But yeah, it resulted in bugs going to two other separate systems, and we just get random Oxford commas depending on the language we're looking at. So that's our list format. It's quite useful for that. For some reason, there's also like a short style, not shirt style, a short style, which uses an ampersand, cool. And then a very narrow style, I think, which just prints them out. Cool. So list formatting, you never have to write a map and a reduce over a list of things again and try and get the right things. Or it's a join, really, isn't it? You just join them with commas, and then you replace the last comma with an and you're already confused, and I am too. There's one more. Hold on. There's a type of unit. You also can just print out a list of them. I don't know why that one's useful. Don't bother with that. But of course, we've seen this in English, but the languages are there as well. Koala, wombat, quokka is entirely reasonable if you want to print it in a different language as well. Like I said, that is very much, I think, down to whether you're trying to fully translate an application or, in some respects, just providing certain bits of the UI that are going to look better to somebody. So these list formatting things, probably want to stick with the majority of the language, but your number formatting, your currencies, a nice way is to make people feel a bit more at home, even though they're in the same language, maybe a separate language, they can still see currencies or units in their own thing. I wanted to take a little sidestep on this and talk a little bit about web components. I think web components have never been, they're getting more popular, which is great because they've been around for about 10 years, and it takes that long to get something popular on the internet if you're just part of the platform. But web components, I think, have been incredibly useful, maybe not for building those entire component-based applications. Component-based architecture is incredibly popular, obviously, as we've seen with things like React and Vue and Angular and everything that does components. And web components, I know there are ways to build entire applications with them, but I'm not sure they're the best thing for that. But what I do think they are is really good for kind of adding a little progressive enhancement and making these kind of APIs a bit more declarative. And so whilst I was playing with this, I ended up writing a web component to do time formatting as well. And so all it is a component, looks like time formatter. You give it a date time attribute like that with that ISO 8601 UTC date in it, and you can give it some fallback content in the middle. So if the Intl API or a web component is not supported in the browser, it'll just fall back to what's in the middle. But if you do this, it will format that date in the time zone of the person that is looking at it and make that thing really easy. I actually have an example of this. So this, when you load this page, it gets the date now and then plugs it into two elements here, the bits in gray there. So the time we loaded this page is, and it's in US English for some reason. but it does know my time zone. Like I say, it's Australia, Melbourne. And let's change the other one to, I want to go to Europe, Paris. Paris was good. I'm not going to find it now. If we change it there, so the day is still the same, but we can then start adding attributes that set the format the same as the object that we saw earlier. So if we want to set the weekday to be long, we just know it's Thursday. Thursday Anno Domini. Not particularly useful, but we can set that Thursday, do a numeric date, do a numeric day. No, let's do a short month. Thursday, June 23rd, 2022, and we can start adding in our times as well. And all this is doing is adding attributes to a web component. And so the entire thing looks like that. It's then replacing its internal content with the result of the Intl formatter. And so all this does is make this entire thing declarative now. We can sidestep having to use the JavaScript APIs and just put a component like this on a page, and it will just act the way we expect it to. I think this could work for other things. You can imagine putting a list formatter in, or another thing for like those pluralizations. Maybe that gets a bit harder because you have to provide those translations for it, which is less declarative at that point. But certainly for time, this is really useful. And so I built and released this. I don't know if any people, I think a few people have installed it. It's available on NPM. There are others available as well, of course. GitHub themselves have a bunch of time elements. Those ones include, I think, their web component, which does a non-Intl-based relative time formatter for their, like, this commit was so many minutes ago. Yeah, relative time format would be another one we could definitely do this for. So if you're interested in kind of seeing how web components can act as a declarative and easy way to use these, check out a couple of these repositories too. And then there's the future. So ECMA 402 is an ongoing group, and so they're continually working on these things as they go on. There are things being raised. As I said, maybe they'll get back to the Oxford Comma debate at some point. But ECMA 402 itself actually works out in the open. They have an entire GitHub repository where they do this kind of conversation in the open. You can go and investigate and see what... so the proposals for new Intl APIs go through the same kind of process that things for JavaScript go through with TC39, the committee that decides on what gets into JavaScript. You go from stage 0, which is like, I think this is a great idea, all the way up to stage 4, which is we'll deploy this in the next version. And you can see what's in at what stage at what time. And so that is really interesting to see what they're working on and what we might get in the platform in the future. But also a great way to suggest these things. And if you are deep into internationalizing a website of your own and you realize that there is something that the platform could do that you've had to reach out to get a library to do instead, or had to build something yourself to do, then it is a great idea to come and take this to ECMA 402 and effectively help pave the COWPATHs. If you're having trouble internationalizing something, or you had to build something, or there's a library for it, then there's other people with that problem too, and we can build this into the platform and get it out there as well. And I kind of recommend that in terms of all JavaScript. Like, it's an open ecosystem. And as long as you can get somebody who kind of works on those committees on your side agreeing with you that yes, this is a problem, then it will kind of gain momentum and be worked on to perhaps make it to a version of JavaScript. So I'm just going to have a quick look at this. Yeah, so under the TC39 repository, we can go see ECMA 402, see what the current proposals are, the active proposals, which is kind of interesting. So there's like number format version 3 is coming up kind of soon. It's made it to stage 3. There's also a duration format, which kind of makes sense, how long something's taken. We've got that relative time since or until something, but then durations. And then we can look at like the experimental one. And actually, I was reading this message format one earlier. I'm not sure I fully understand it, but it sounds like it's going to really help all sorts of standards and things like that. Easier to localize the entire web, which is quite a claim for an international standard. But it's in stage 1, and we can see this going through. You can also see other things like smart unit preferences. I like that. Trying to make things smarter and easier to get the right thing So localized, like lengths in miles in the US and kilometers in France, pounds in the US and kilograms in France, and who knows what in the UK since Brexit. Anyway, let's think of the future of the web is bright. The future of internationalization on the web and the future of how we build UIs for our users and make them feel comfortable understanding and reading those things. This is all part of the platform. It's all part of JavaScript or ECMAScript and is available on the web and on the server side. And so use that platform. Don't reach for a library if we can do it on the platform, because that is amazing. And that is all I've got time for. Like I said, I'm thirsty too. So thank you very much. Again, my name is Nash. I'm a developer evangelist at Twilio, and it's been an absolute pleasure to speak with you today. Before we get them to open the doors and serve us drinks, does anybody have any questions? There is a little microphone in the middle. I believe that's useful to talk into because we have the live streams and recordings going on. So if you have a question, jump up, or I can repeat it as well. I can do that.
So I'm just wondering, do you know what value triggers the BC era?
What value triggers BC? That's a good question. We're on to a new Intl date time formatter. I'm going to need a date. Right, do we want to be like, what's 0? You'd have thought, right? I need to come up with the date. What was the date? Oh, it's just... Wait, hold on. And I need to show the era in long, let's say. So we've got a formatter, and let's format new date that is 000000 T. Yeah, I'm very excited. Z. We'll do it in UTC, obviously. No. Oh, no, wait, hold on. No, invalid time value. Okay, I might not get that right. I don't know off the top of my head.
0 days and 0 months would be correct.
That's true. You're absolutely right. Okay. So,
What's year 1?
Track 1 days or something like that. Leave that as an exercise for customers.
Yeah. I'll have an answer tomorrow. Come see me at the Twilio booth for that. Otherwise, yeah, thanks very much. Enjoy party tonight, and I'll see you all there. Cheers.